Good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome to the Growth Company's Let's Get Down to Business Black Women at the Table event. And this is to support International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March. And the theme for that event is Break the Bias. So we can all sort of champion that as part of that particular sort of event at the end of today. So my name is Novlette Balela. I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead for the Growth Company, and actually will be chairing sort of the event today. What we've got here is a panel of esteemed guests of Black women in business to discuss a really topical issue at the moment about understanding the challenges and barriers that Black women face in the workplace. And I will be asking panel members a series of questions for us to discuss and debate to get that sort of clear understanding about some of those lived experiences of women in business and in the workplace. I shall try to do my best to pronounce your names correct, but if I don't, just correct me. I'll do my best where I can. So what I'm going to do first is actually introduce your panel members. So Sharon Amesu is a multi-award winning professional speaker. Hi Sharon, just do a wave to us. Who started a career in law and was a criminal barrister for 16 years. Sharon is the director of SA Consulting and co-founder of She Leads for Legacy, that supports organisations with leadership development and diversity and inclusion initiatives. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
Right. Jay, but is it Bhayani?
Bhayani.
Bhayani. Hi, Jay, thank you. Is a solicitor and managing director of Bhayani Human Resource and Employment Law, which is one of a handful of niche law firms specialising in all aspects of human resource and people management. Jay looks after clients across the UK. They're based in Sheffield with satellite offices in Leeds, Barnsley, Leicester and London. In 2021, Jay was recognised as the top UK human resource advisor by Enterprise Nation. Welcome, Jay. And Laolu. Hey? Laolu. Dada, sorry. Laolu is the Chief Operating Officer for Black Codher and founding team. Niyo Enterprise, after just under 2 years in the public sector, she joined the founding team of Niyo Enterprise Group, spearheading their communication and marketing, a tech bootcamp brand that helps women upskill and change career and has been instrumental in empowering and inspiring Black women to get into tech jobs. Welcome. Ayisatu Emore is director and health coach of Idaraya Life as a direct response to the health inequalities that became apparent in 2020. The business helps women recognise that they have the power to live a healthy life that suits their dynamic lifestyles. Ayisatu participates in a wide range of diversity and equality-driven spaces as she believes deeply in being the change you want to see. Welcome. Ceewhy Ochoga, founder and CEO of Black Impact, which is a national African and Caribbean student network that seeks to support the leadership development and career aspirations of Black students in the United Kingdom. Welcome, Ceewhy. Sandra Smith is Director of Learning and founder of Focus Lane Books. Her wealth of experience inspired her to create Focus Learn Books, which is a set of motivational exercise books for children aged 8 to 16. These books focus on 3 different subjects: English, Maths and Science. Welcome, Sandra. And finally, we have Fiona Miller, our Service Hub Manager, who works for the Justice Contract and is based in the Growth Company. And he works for the Growth Company and based in Sheffield. Welcome, Fiona. So thank you, everybody, for coming again this afternoon for this discussion and this debate. But what I'm going to start off with before we start with the questions is putting some of this into context. So I'm not quite sure if anybody's actually seen the recent survey, which was conducted by the Black Women in Leadership Network called Black Women in the UK Workplace, which is this document here. Okay, so it's just been released, 2022. So it actually captures the lived experience of Black women and identify the pertinent issues that create a barometer for systemic change over time. So some of these key statistics are really sort of important because they look at 4 particular areas. The first was around career advancement. And the survey says that 4 in 10 women do not believe they are offered the same career advancement opportunities and are overlooked for promotion. The second area was around sponsorship and mentoring, and 4 in 7 women only had a workplace mentor or sponsor. And in terms of racial discrimination, 2 in 3 women reported experiencing racial bias at work and had resigned due to race-related unfair treatment. And finally, on equal pay, is that Black women earn less than their white counterparts and performing the same job. And that racial bias contributed to their earning disparity. So there's sort of, and that's an up-to-date data and information that's recently been published. I sent this document to my CEO and all our senior management team because I felt it was important that they understood some of these challenges in the workplace and to have some sort of conversations about, well, what we're going to do to address these. Okay, so it's very useful for you to get hold of that and read it. So let's now move on to some of the questions. So the first question is, what are the challenges for Black women in the workplace and how has this impacted on yourself? So this question, I'm going to direct it firstly at Sharon.
So thanks very much, Novlette. It's great to be part of this conversation today and to be among so many incredible Black women. And it's such an important conversation for us to be having. She Leads for Legacy, which is the organization that I co-founded with my daughter, really came about because of the fact that 20 plus years ago, I was making my way into the legal profession as a criminal barrister and experienced issues around race intersection, me being a Black woman. And the concern that really came for us is that my daughter, who herself is making her way into the profession, found that many of the experiences that I had, she is having. And we began to have conversations around that, around wider peers, and recognize that there are still those issues. For example, in relation to social capital, it was one of the big issues for us, not knowing anyone in the profession. And of course, we know that one of the key things when it comes to career progression is who you know. Do you know people who are able to open doors for you, who are able to invite you to the table, who are able to connect you in? And lacking that social capital is a real issue for Black women in the workplace. We also know, and I'm sure that everyone will have lots to contribute, but I just propose to highlight a couple. There's also the issue of what I've described really as the perception of an ambition gap. There are many conversations that I have with various organizations. And one of the ideas that often organizations have in their minds is that there is a lack of ambition, that sometimes Black women don't have the ambition to aspire to more senior leadership roles. And I often ask myself, who are the Black women that you're speaking to? Because certainly there's a piece of research that was identified from leanin.org, which identified that Black women are up to 8% more ambitious than their white female counterparts. We don't lack ambition. We really want those roles. It's about the gatekeepers recognizing our potential. We also have to deal with what I often describe as the racial fatigue that comes from having to fight our corner and hold our own and be in that space when we're often the only one in that space. We also have to deal with things like microaggressions and micro insults. Very recently, and I'll say this and then I'll stop, from a personal experience that I had only a matter of a couple of months ago. So a criminal barrister by profession, leading into my career, there are various odd jobs that I had to make my way through my studies. At one time, I was a cleaner, and I did a cleaning job whilst I was at university, and I'm proud of the fact that I did that. I'm not ashamed of it at all, and very much honor and recognize people who are working in any profession. But I posit that to say this. So I was invited to an event in central Manchester to be a speaker on a panel. And I dressed up in the way in which I always do when I'm invited to an event. When I arrived at this location, this office building, there was a security officer who was at the front desk, and I asked if this was the location of this event. The security officer said, yes, it is, but this is not the entrance that you use. And he sent me round to the back of the building. When I went to the back of the building, at this time I was completely oblivious to what was going on. I thought, oh, he's just directing me to another entrance. Well, the entrance was a metal door with metal concrete steps to the back. And at the back were other people wearing hairnets and so on. They were cleaners, etc. So again, it didn't click. I thought maybe it's a secret bingo that I've been invited to, and I didn't quite know what the memo was. Knocked on the door, no response, went back to the security officer. He guided me again, and it's only then that it clicked that he'd assumed I was the cleaner. So I found my way finally into this location, but I went back to him and I challenged him about his assumption around who I could be and my eligibility to be a speaker on this panel. Now, when I arrived, I had to deal with all of that emotional turmoil of having to deal with that security officer. Everyone else just arrived and just were able to deliver in the moment. It was that baggage that I had to deal with and overcome quickly in order to deliver. So it's those sorts of things that we experience to this day as Black women.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon. Sort of ditto. I could understand and appreciate the frustrations of that experience. Laolu, could I ask you whether you got any sort of examples or of situations very similar?
Thank you so much, Novlette. And I couldn't agree with you more, Sharon. I hear these stories from a lot of our students on our boot camps. We run tech boot camps to help get Black women into companies like KPMG or Citibank, earning higher income, but obviously they do have to jump through certain hoops. And one of the things that we work on diligently as an organization is making sure we hold companies accountable for the level of bias that these women experience going through their processes. And in my observation, I found that a lot of the time it's this unconscious bias, these rose-tinted glasses that they're wearing, and they're now using this to, you know, when you're in school, you had different sort of exams. You had exam marks where they're looking for where they can give you plus points, and there are exams where they're looking to remove points. And I've found so many times that Black women, especially when they're applying for roles or in these organizations, they are being marked against. People are constantly looking for where to remove points from these women. And it's so detrimental because you then begin to internalize this. And, you know, this whole idea of angry Black women is so potent, but a lot of the time I ask, well, why wouldn't she be angry? why wouldn't she carry that energy in her face or in her body language? Because she's dealing with these internalizations of being treated like she's less, like she doesn't have the ability, or that she's not ambitious. So I think that, again, these are some of the things that women are dealing with when they are looking to progress their careers. And I think, again, the Black Women in Leadership report was so interesting to me, because a lot of the time other women are looking for representation. I know that I am where I am today because I saw other women do entrepreneurship, do tech, and I saw myself in them. I was like, well, she can do it, I can do it. And it's so important that we're looking at where we can be represented, and so that when we're in those representation roles, that we can hold people accountable, hold gatekeepers accountable, hold the people that have power accountable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Laolu. And yes, it is a real challenge for Black women to move on and get on, and we are sort of assessed very differently, and we're having to jump more hoops than what we and our white counterparts have to. And it's really frustrating because myself, I get tired. And at the moment, I'm saying to everybody, I'm tired now, because it feels as though I've had a lifelong experience of trying to jump hoops and trying to be the best that I can be in traditional sort of areas. And I just feel that I'm worn out. I'm worn out now, really sort of tired of the whole experience. So yes, so thank you for that. That's been really helpful. So what we're going to do now is to move on to the next question. And that's what coping mechanisms have you used when faced with discrimination in the workplace? And I'm going to ask that question to begin with to Jay.
Thank you. I think, first of all, what I'd say is that perhaps my experience is different. I mean, I'm in my 50s. When I was growing up, I was, the term Black woman was applicable to me as an Indian woman, as an Indian British woman. That's up for question, isn't it? Because there's a sea change there. I think lots of people from different ethnic minorities don't particularly want to be called Black. Now, I don't have an issue with it, but I think I come from a generation where it was, if you weren't white, you were Black. And I think in some ways that's helpful. But I know that, for the younger generation, that's not a term that, is necessarily comfortable either for Black women or for, non-Black women that are from an ethnic minority. But I think also my experience has been different in the sense that, for example, as Sharon was talking about the legal profession, well, when I entered the legal profession, I had no connections at all. I was sort of first generation going to university. I'd come over from Uganda, with the Idi Amin exodus. So life was tough. But I think for Black women, it's harder because it's a double-edged sword, because you've got the sexism as well as racism going on. So it really is, it's a tough thing. And I think that really the culture of any organization or company is set by its leadership. And until you get people into those positions of leadership, you can't really change culture very easily. I personally was very fortunate in that I got my first job in a firm where there were very typically white, middle-aged, middle-class men who were the partners in a firm, but they were very, very keen to embrace diversity. They were keen to change their own workplace and have different influences. They were really forward-thinking. So when I joined, I had to find some coping mechanisms because I'd moved to Sheffield, which wasn't diverse at all compared to Leicester, where I grew up. And it was a real shock. It was a shock to me how differently I was perceived by people, particularly when I was more junior. And in terms of coping mechanisms, I talk to my children a lot about how you deal with racist attitudes, undertones, as well as, more obvious, banter or behaviour towards you. And I always say that, I kind of I challenge things. I never let things go. And I always say to my kids, you have to challenge, but constructively. And I think that's one of my coping mechanisms, is that I think, well, if as a lawyer, I've learned that without challenge, nothing changes. And I kind of, I'm on a mission to change things. And so from a personal perspective, if I see something that I find offensive or other people around me might find offensive, I will challenge that and perhaps get the person to think about why they behave like that or why they think that. And I'm finding, like you, Novlette, I thought things had changed a lot, but I'm getting tired of it because I'm pushing back a lot more these days than I did when I was younger. And maybe that's because I've got sort of young adult children, and I feel I have to do that. But from an employment lawyer's perspective, I just want to, say that there are avenues, more formal avenues, open to people as a way of coping. You don't have to just cope in silence. So using employment rights and employment legislation and making sure people are aware of that, it is really important.
Okay, thank you so much, Jay, for that insight. And the same question goes to Ayisatu about some of the sort of experience and coping mechanisms of discrimination.
So with regards to coping mechanisms, I think I was quite fortunate that my mother raised me to be always quite comfortable and proud of being Black. So I just never really I luckily just never had an inferiority complex about anything like that. I was never taught to put my hands in the pockets when I went to shops, for example, and I had no concept of that for my life. So I think by the time I got to the workplace, I was quite confident and secure in my Blackness, that it wasn't necessarily a deciding factor as to how I was present in the workplace. But you quickly learn when you are employed in this place that people don't care about how secure they are. They'll come at you anyway. And what I found to be good, which is I'm a gabby person, but I found silence to be very powerful, in that if someone said something that was offensive, I always made sure I made it clear, like, oh, that was offensive. And you sort of let people dig their hole themselves, because then there is defenses that people come out with. What I recognized as one of my experiences was I was supposed to interview for my job, basically, at a workplace. And going into it, they wanted to offer it to someone else who had been working on the team that I had been training. And they tried to justify that for me. And I sort of just asked them to justify it and stayed quiet and let them speak. And they weren't able to. And I did not have to interview for my job eventually. But it's things like that I found were effective for me, in that being secure in myself meant that I didn't have to spend a lot of energy doing the sort of like mental gymnastics of going, oh, maybe I am this, or maybe what they have said does have any sort of like grain of truth to it, or, oh, I'm going to have to work 10 times as hard as my sort of like, like my white counterpart in order to get the same thing. Because I was secure in what I did and I always brought my best to the table, I didn't quite fall into that trap, which I generally only recently started to recognize as a massive plus. So I think my coping mechanism is being quite secure in myself as a woman in the workplace. I have insecurities present in other places, but in terms of work, I'm quite assured of myself. And I think being able to go out with that confidence without apology has really served me well, because there's some things that just don't get started with me. So I don't necessarily have a long roll call of microaggressions, because I think I may be slightly oblivious to them when they happen, because I don't even register a lot of things. So that's how I've ended up dealing with those kind of discriminatory type behaviors. I generally I've chosen to live my own life, and I sort of don't let anything else direct or sort of like derail me from making the decisions that I want to make for myself.
Okay, that's so powerful. Good that you've actually been able, that's a sort of sense of empowerment and believing and having a real good sense of who you are and your position, not just in the workplace, but in society. And I think that's something or an area that some of us really, really lack, is having that sense of worth and, not taking any sort of negativity in the workplace. So really empowering sort of statement, Ayisatu. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask somebody else the same question, and that's Ceewhy. Ceewhy? She's probably thinking she's done it wrong again.
Okay, Ceewhy. And I was
Ceewhy. I was right the first time when I was thinking it in my head.
My spirit said she was coming to me, so I was just like, all right, get ready for it. It's okay. And oh my goodness, I just have been, if you guys would just be like, because I could just absolutely relate to a lot of things that all of you amazing women have been saying. When Sharon started talking about and she was talking about the lack of social capital, I was like, yes, because that is something that even in Black Impact, the organization I founded, we strive to build for Black students, because as you've all touched on, when you don't know someone in an organization, then you're wasting time, especially, and then for students, you've come out with, you're facing an attainment gap, so you're less likely to graduate with a 2-1 or a first as compared to your white counterparts. So your chance of getting a job is even longer. So if you don't know anybody, it's even extra long, you know? So when she talked about social capital, I was just like, absolutely, yes. Talking about Black women not having ambition, I was like in my head, and I made a note, I said, it's actually the organizations that project that onto us, because they don't expect you to. They look at you like, oh, this one cannot have any ambition, and they treat you like that. So it's a projection onto us. You know, we're treated with the projection that they have. So whatever we're bringing to the table is not really seen, you know. And when Sharon talked about her experience of all of that she went through, I was mortified, because I was just like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'll do if I was the one. But then something that hit me was, you go into those spaces dealing with the baggage of what the incident caused you, and then having to deal with the pressure that you're facing on the day just of normal life, you know, as compared to everyone. So it's just like layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of all of those things. And personally, one major thing, and which I kind of made a note of when Ayisatu was speaking, was, you know, when like, how do you cope with it all? And I was just thinking, how have I actually been coping? And I was like, I just cope with myself, you know, I just deal with it, because there's almost nowhere to go to, really. It was because of the difficulties and the experiences that I faced, having nowhere to turn to, that Black Impact started. So it was like, since I can't find help anywhere, I will start something, you know? So and one major experience that I've had to deal with, and I think I still deal with this today, is you work twice as hard to get your foot in the door and to have a seat at the table. And then it somewhat shapes your personality to become someone who strives for the best, strives for the most. But then I found that then is misconstrued or misunderstood. And then I'm labeled as aggressive. In fact, I've been called aggressive in the workplace before. I'm labeled as aggressive, and then I'm told, Ceewhy, you know, you're very strong, your personalities come across very strong, so you'll struggle to get a job. See, they won't employ you, because if you go to an interview like that, your manager, who is often, of course, always white, will just be intimidated and think you're coming to take over their job in the next 5 months or 6 months. So you can't go like that. So then it's like, how do I live? How do I survive? Because I have to work twice as hard to prove myself, to even get that interview. And then I come to the interview, and then I should dumb down so that I can make you feel comfortable. But then you would interpret that as a lack of ambition on my part. So it's like, there is no way that it can work except but for the grace of God. There is absolutely no way that you can posit yourself, you know, to take advantage of a situation. So I think my personal, how I've navigated it and how I encourage students that I deal with, we support, because that's what Black Impact does. Because like I said, it came from a difficult place. I was facing a terrible time at work, and that was what led me. I started to find other Black students. I became the first Black president of a student union here in Manchester a number of years ago. And the difficulties I had at work, and having no support anywhere, no one to turn to really. I also started to find other Black students who were in positions like mine, being president and vice president of students' unions, who were going through similar issues with no support. And then I started to bring everyone together, and that was how Black Impact was formed. At that time, it just started like support, but it's grown to become so many more things. So when I'm working with students, Black students in general, how do you cope in the workplace? One thing I've often said, and even right now, it's a live issue with one of the students we're supporting with issues in the workplace, is don't assume, going with an assumption that the rules will not be applied the same way to you as it's applied to everyone else. So go have that assumption. It's not fair. It's not the right thing, but going with that assumption so that you know how to behave when you're not expecting that, because it's something, the same thing you've done, A did it, A didn't even get as much as a slap on the wrist. They were just told in the back office, don't do that again. But you've done something less, and then you're probably going to face a disciplinary for it. So just don't go into these spaces expecting that everything will be handed out to you the same way it is to everyone else. I think it's a sad situation. I say this and my heart is breaking as I'm saying it, because it's the baggage that we've just talked about. You go into these spaces with, just the stress of the whole environment, and then the stress that just, working and being a human being comes with. It's so much for people to handle. But I cope by knowing what to expect, trying to arm myself with what to expect, and then going in and being true to myself. See, this is who I am, and you can't come and tell me something else because of your assumptions or how you view me from wherever those opinions have been formed. So I'm always, and maybe it comes a bit from my psychology background, self-awareness. I always say this to our students: be self-aware, know who you are. Be self-aware, know who you are, master your brief. So when you're asked and you open your mouth, you know what you're talking about. Don't let yourself down by falling into the trap of the wrong or negative or not fully formed mindsets that they have about you. So know yourself, self-awareness, master your brief, and then going with the expectation that it will not always be to you as it is to everybody else. That's how I navigate spaces in my personal life, and that's what we try to teach our students, and also to encourage them through the sessions that we have for them.
Oh, that's so fantastic and fabulous and inspirational words that will resonate with me for the rest of the day. I think it's really important that also, we have those conversations with our young people about some of those challenges and really sort of inspire and empower them. Because it's it is a different experience, and until they're actually in those particular environments, it can be quite difficult for them to circumvent themselves around the workplace and know what to do to keep sane or to really move on. It can be quite challenging for them. So we have to constantly have those conversations with our younger people to be able for them to cope with that. Thank you very much. The next question would be around what should organisations do to empower Black women? What can they do better or differently to empower Black women in the workplace? And this question is going to Fiona.
Very good question. And I always reach for the stars, but then ask for the bare minimum. And the bare minimum to me is demonstrate, as you do with others, a high level of respect for an individual. And I think that bare minimum will take you or take an individual a long way. But unfortunately, the journey that we've just all spoken about is quite difficult for some people just to contextualize, let alone implement in their day-to-day practice and interactions with you on a daily basis. So empowering a Black woman in the workplace isn't a major thing to do, because I believe, just listening to the women that I've heard speak around this table today, we're actually already empowered. We just need that level of respect to be demonstrated when we're actually in your organisation, so we can excel and do good for the organisation, but not just do good for the organisation, but the people that we're actually serving as well, and be that true reflection of the community that we actually really are in supporting those individual journeys. So I would just bottom line it and just say, demonstrate the basics of respecting us, who we are, what we come with, our talent, experience and expertise, and most importantly, our Black and beautiful skin.
Okay, thank you so much, Fiona, for that insight. And Sandra, question goes to you as well.
Thank you. Now, I've been teaching now, this year will be 30 years of me teaching as a maths teacher and director of learning. So I've had a wealth of experience, different experiences from different schools and over the years. Now, myself as a Black teacher, you really do need, employers do need to make you feel that there's a safe place for you as a Black woman and as a Black person to go to. There needs to be that safe haven that I can speak to you, because we do have a uniqueness. Now, I'll give you an example. As a teacher in the classroom, I will hear a language that a child is using, and I will say, that's a bad word. But because they don't understand that, I'm now making a fuss about something that doesn't need to be brought up, doesn't need to be considered. So it's me feeling, like you say, Fiona, feeling respected, feeling valued, that what I'm saying or the advice that I'm giving to you is something that needs to be, what can I say? It needs to be acted on. But because the institution don't see that as a matter of importance, therefore that behavior just continues. And so you feel, well, I'm not going to say anything then. I won't say anything to you. I will deal with it myself. So as a Black teacher, I need a safe place where I can speak, because I know that when I meet my Black counterparts, my Black teachers outside of school, we have so much to talk about, and it's always the same thing: how you are perceived, how they see you in school. I was working a job, and then when I left that job because of I wasn't meant to have mental health issues, I'm supposed to remain as strong as ever. That job was given to 8 people. So how am I supposed to feel then that I was given a job that I was expected to perform 100% on that job, do everything as well as plan and do and teach, and then be that superwoman, and I'm not supposed to say, hey ho, I'm feeling a bit stuck here. I am a human being. I need help. So it's that as well. Black women are perceived as being strong. No, we're not strong. We're surviving. We're surviving. Everything that I've done over my 30 years of teaching has been, I've got the challenge. Here's the challenge. How am I going to deal with this now? Because I've got all those young people who are looking up to me, and I cannot let them down, as well as my own children. So we do have other things behind us that we're dealing with. You don't want to let the family down. You don't want to let your children down. You don't want to let yourself down. So you'll stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, preparing, planning, and doing everything. Then you go to the meeting and nobody wants to look at what you've got to present. So you think, well, this is not making any sense. So it's that safe place where employers recognize that we do have unique concerns and we need to be valued. And I feel that I need to speak to you, and it's not out because I'm being aggressive, it's out of concern. And it's just that safe place, that conversation that you feel that you can have, and it's not going to go against you.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sandra. And a lot of those things that you've actually said does resonate with me in terms of feeling valued and, having to, face challenges. And also the fact that you're a positive role model to Black students who very sort of rarely see a Black teacher in the classroom. And I think sometimes that's really sort of important that your presence might have sort of empowered other young Black students in terms of really excelling in education. And I think that's important too. So the same question, Sharon, goes to you about empowering Black women.
So I feel that, goodness, the stories around this virtual room have been just incredibly moving and striking, and just highlights why this conversation is so necessary. Just hearing you describe that scenario, Sandra, of doing the work of 8 people is beyond absurd. It's beyond ridiculous, and sadly not unique. And so every single organization, I believe, has a responsibility to all of its employees, paying attention to the intersectional challenges of Black women in the workplace. We've heard the word repeated several times, fatigue, that Black fatigue, as one author describes it as. And so what first of all do I think organizations should do? Well, you can't address anything at all. You can't change something that you're not aware of. So it starts with understanding your data. Who is in your organization and where do they sit in that organization? And then going beyond that and understanding what is their experience within the organization. To what extent do they feel included? Do they feel valued? Do they feel as though they belong? To what extent do they feel as though the opportunities for career progression are just as much available to them as their white counterparts? Do your gender pay gap? Do your ethnicity pay gap? Start seeing what the data is telling you about your current state of affairs, because unless you do, you won't know what you're addressing. You also need to respond to that. So there's no point gathering the data and then doing nothing with the data. Having regard to what the status quo tells you you are where you are, then put in formal organizational structures to address that, and then measure and monitor. How are we performing against what we committed to do? So I would say start off with your data, and then move on to actually doing something about that data. But just as a low-hanging fruit, because that process can take some time, just your low-hanging fruit, the immediate thing that organizational leaders can do, leaders and managers, start having conversations one-to-one with your employees. Don't wait for a large organizational program. Have conversations. And to the extent that your employees are wanting to have those conversations, because some of them may not. Some women are tired of having the conversation, to be perfectly honest, Novlette. They're done and they don't want to. Respect that too. Yeah. But also where they are willing to, create that safe, non-judgmental space for them to articulate their experience and to be heard. That's in relation to the organizations. I feel specifically for Black women in the workplace, what they can do. Well, first of all, I'd say your self-care is paramount. It's not your responsibility to save the world. It really isn't. And I know that from personal experience. I remember when this was mentioned by C.I.C about that weight of responsibility that you feel toward the whole planet. You, as a Black woman, especially in the legal profession, where it is difficult even now to get into the profession, there's woeful underrepresentation. And I felt a huge weight of responsibility representing the entire demography, but actually I wasn't. And I had to take that weight off myself because it was much too heavy a burden to bear. So what does that mean? It means that where I feel that I need to bow out of something, I need to just bow out of something. I can't carry the weight of that. I also feel it's important, as Sandra has said, to find like-minded people who can relate to your experience and who you can share with candor and honesty and vulnerability. It's so important to build those networks. And where you are able to use your voice, use your voice. Yes. Speak up, bring challenge. It does make a difference. And sometimes it's those awkward points. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary to do so. The final thing that I would say on this as well, and it's not always easy because I'm mindful of sort of our financial commitments and the like, but don't stay where it's impossible for you to thrive. Don't stay there. The damage that can do to your overall well-being, your mental health, your career progression, etc. Don't stay where you're not welcome and there's no prospect of change.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Again, such inspirational words. You women are empowering me. You're bringing back some sort of normality to what the sort of experiences have been, I very rarely have the opportunity to have these types of conversations, and probably the first time for me. And I'm 60-year-old and been working for a long, long, long time, and I have never been able to develop a network of Black women to have these conversations with. So my coping mechanisms have all been internal and empowering and being motivated and just doing the things that's right by me and what I think is right by everybody else, to keep me going, or I probably would have dipped out by now. So the final question then, following that conversation, is what should organisations do then to tackle inequality and discrimination and racism in the workplace? And that's going to Laolu.
This has been such a refreshing conversation, honestly. I think it's twofold. So, and it does link a lot to the previous question that's been answered. The Google I Am Remarkable campaign in 2020, apologies, in 2020 actually found that $65 billion is being spent yearly replacing women who feel like, not just women, but replacing people who have been discriminated against. And that's a massive amount of money. And then you now look at it, you know, a lot of companies exist to make profit. I think that organizations need to understand that diversity in their organization and embracing diversity actually benefits their bottom line of making profit. A lot of companies don't see it like that. However, if your producers look like the society that you're producing for, then you would find that it's beneficial to make sure that those people behind the scenes look like your customers and the people buying from you. And it's really, really important for companies to understand that, because it will drive everything. And I know that we don't want it to just be focused on money, but a lot of organizations, and we do speak to, I speak to a lot of our employer partners and let them know this is going to benefit you long term financially, but short term, because these people with different experiences are coming in looking at things from a separate perspective, and that's going to benefit whatever it is that you're doing in this organization. I also think that going back to measuring and monitoring, I think that, Sharon, you mentioned that it's so crucial that companies are really reviewing their data and looking at these things from beginning to end. What sort of people, what is the average applicant to their organization look like? How can they expand or change the sort of funnels that they are marketing to for these roles? Because a lot of the time, companies go to the same recruitment agencies, you know, find us a 24-year-old white male, Ollie, you know, he's done a degree in finance, something like that. But they're not looking at these massive online communities of Black women, of Black people with various skills, that really, really talented people that they can tap into. Talent is really, really important. And I think that organizations, when they identify that there are different streams that they can tap into to recruit talent, they'll begin to experience diversity in their organizations as well. And I think for me, a personal story, I remember when I was recruited, I was working for local government at the time. And I remember my first day, my password was BME and the year I was born. And
I love that.
Oh my.
and I thought, okay, so I'm a token, right? And I remember that experience, that I found it quite amusing, because I was like, nobody thought to change my password. Like, nobody thought about that. But what that really showed me is that, okay, if I've come in here and they think that I'm going to be the voice of the people, what my job is to do from like an employee point of view is to show them that actually we look different, we have different experiences, we have different ideologies, but altogether we bring so much value as a people from a specific background. And I think that the more I meet with employers, the more I pioneer that, because ultimately, if you're looking for talent, you've got to look where you haven't been looking. People that aren't thinking like you, aren't seeing solving solutions the same way as you, is so important. So that's what I would say.
So much. That's really sort of inspirational words again. I can see the time is nearing for us. So, you know what? I'm going to ask each one of you to actually share some words of inspiration that we can share with other women who will be watching this as part of International Women's Day, and can be left with something that actually will really sort of move them on that sort of agenda and their journey. So if each of one of you can actually think about a word of inspiration, and Sharon, I know you've got to leave very shortly, so I'm going to start off with you just so that we get everybody's sort of viewpoint on this, because I think it's really important that we end on a real positive and high note.
I would simply say, your time is now. We need your voice.
Thank you. Right, your time is now. We need your voice. Ceewhy?
I would say that you're an equal and valued part of the space wherever you find yourself, and don't let anyone or anybody or anything make you feel less than. That's it.
That's fine. Thank you. Fiona?
Oh, so, I would say continue, no matter what you face, to appreciate and love who you are as a beautiful Black woman, whatever shell you come in. It's so important when you're facing and walking through adversity that you continually have that recognition of how beautiful and a beautiful soul that you are. And it's okay. We are strong, Black women, to go through what we go through. But it's also okay to sit down and seek support and rest and respite. And that is all part of loving and appreciating who you are as an individual, so you can move on to the next stage, is what I'd say.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Jay? Thank you.
I'd say that you should celebrate your points of difference and use them, because you can add, as Laolu was saying, I think it's really good, you can add your different perspective from an economic point of view, apart from everything else. And you can shift perceptions, and you can add things to the business or organization that you're working for if you celebrate your points of difference rather than dumbing them down.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, Jay. Sandra?
I speak to my fellow teachers out there because I know what you're going through. And from my experience, I'm going to say we have a unique approach, which is so valuable in any establishment where we work. We're unique. We have that power of strength within us, and you see that really ooze out in anything that we do. We just see it, and children respond to it because they pick up straight away that, yeah, you're for us, so they pick up on that, on that vibrant attitude that we have towards anything that we do. And that's what makes us so unique and so valuable in the teaching establishment.
Thank you, Sandra. Ayisatu?
I'd like to say that, woman, you are entitled to success and joy, and you have all that you need already.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Short and sweet. Laolu?
Yes.
I think, just to top it all, ultimately disruption just starts with being your authentic self. And it's not your responsibility alone to make massive ripples of change. Actually, just do your part, and be present in the room and own it and let everybody else do their part.
Thank you so much. And mine would be, because I actually said this when I actually received my honorary doctorate from Sheffield Hallam University is be the best you want to be. Because I sometimes think, you know, we have to be other people and be like other people. And we know we want to see role models out there, but we've actually got to be true to ourselves as well and be what we want to be and really sort of capture that and really accelerate that. But I'd like to actually thank you all for your contribution today. It's been a really sort of fruitful discussion and one I can sort of treasure for sort of a long time to come, because like I've said, I've not had the opportunity to have these conversations with other Black women around the table before. But I hope that what you have done is showed and demonstrated some of those key challenges that Black women face in the workplace and just living life, basically, because not all of it is about being in the workplace. We have other challenges externally as well that we're trying to manage. But what you also have done as well is given great inspirational words to other people out there to actually say, you know, we can rise above that. We can make things different. We can change the narrative. And I think all those things are really important. And I hope we continue having these ongoing conversations outside of this sort of roundtable event moving forward. So thank you for your contribution and your time.